You're listening to the Blockaday podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Blockaday podcast, where we take blockchain concepts and present them simply and inclusively so that a diverse audience can understand how this technology can benefit them. And today I am thrilled to be joined by my good friend Ryan Badgley. Ryan got into crypto and blockchain around the same time I did back in 2017, which is a lifetime in crypto. He currently works as an equipment custodian for the Burnaby RCMP, where he is in charge of things like inventory management and making sure that the police force have the equipment they need to keep us all safe. He also has a background in criminology and extensive experience working with firearms, specifically on the logistics side of things. Ryan, thanks so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Man, this is kind of, to derail the podcast for 1 second, very a gushy moment for me. Like me and Ryan, we always have exciting chats like this about crypto and blockchain, and to do it like kind of more formally on a podcast is like kind of cool.
Yeah, it feels exciting. I agree, man.
Yeah. Okay, let's get started. The first thing I'd like to ask you about, obviously I know, but can you share how you first got into crypto and blockchain? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, of course. I remember the exact moment I first really saw it up front. I was waiting in line to go on a ride during a Halloween themed thing at the local carnival here in Vancouver, and then my buddy was showing me his phone. I didn't know what I was looking at first. There's a bunch of like pictures of like rocket ships and weird green symbols, and then he told me these are cryptocurrencies and they all have a value based in US dollar, and I was just seeing these charts going up, and I was asking him, like, are you buying it and making money off them? He says, yeah, I'm changing my life. People are getting crazy rich off this. Like, this is the future. And it's funny, even after he showed me that, I still didn't get into them. It wasn't until a few months later, like in December, when the boom started to hit, that first real bull run when Bitcoin went to 19K, that's when I really started to buy in. And I kind of rode that up there and rode that crazy ride to the top, and then rode it all the way back down to the bottom, and then I diamond hands it. And then that's when I really started to kind of do like the real educating part for myself, was like after I had just rode the roller coaster, then go, oh, okay, now I should probably learn about how this stuff works, right? So it goes way back there, and then it's been a journey ever since, I suppose, just trying to keep on top of things as they roll in. Because as you said before, that this space changes so quickly. Like 5 years is a lifetime in this space, right? Like the crypto space that existed back in 2017 is vastly different to what exists today. Right?
That's for sure. Do you have an example of that? Like, how is it different today, like almost 5 years later?
I mean, just take the top 10 coins. There's probably 2 or 3 that were in the top 10 5 years ago that are still there. Now, like, you have Bitcoin, you have, I guess, Tether's still there, and Ethereum, but, you had other coins like Stellar and stuff that were top 10, and now those are probably like, I don't know how far that is down there now, but just things change, and then projects come and go, projects rise and fall, I guess. And then also like adoption, like Bitcoin's a household name now. 5 years ago, it was like a whisper you'd hear in some back alley in Vancouver, but now it's like, your grandma knows about Bitcoin, and she actually owns some if she's smart, right? So it's very different. Like, it's almost, not quite there yet that we envisioned, like talking about it running the entire world, but it's getting there, man. I think it's getting there.
Yeah. It's been a pretty crazy ride to see it go from this very niche thing that, we almost got made fun of for investing in it initially, right? Like, idiots. I mean, at the time, it did look like a pretty poor investment if you got in like, early 2018.
Yeah.
But over time, to see it become more accepted, adopted by big banks, offering it as official like financial products, by companies like Tesla actually buying it and putting it on their balance sheet, things that were pretty much memes and jokes back when we first started in this thing, that are now like, it's real life now. It's like, whoa, what even happened?
Told you so. We told you. We tried to warn you.
It's pretty amazing. So obviously, like, we've come a long way. We've learned a lot. But even today, especially with how popular cryptocurrency has become, there's a lot of people who are just getting into the space now. So if you were in their shoes now, so kind of looking back at yourself, 4 or 5 years ago, is there any like advice you would give yourself back then, or to these new people coming in today, that would maybe help them avoid some of the pains that you had going through?
There's so many mistakes we made. I'm sure you can chime in too. But one big thing I recommend is get like your information and your advice from more than just one source, more than just one YouTuber or one forum, because like you never know how biased one source could be, how out of date information could be, and just good to get multiple perspectives on a project. Like say about an investment you want to make. Like you might get excited to want to jump into something that you hear some YouTuber ranting and raving about, but then you don't not realize that this guy is, for example, buying up, a huge stockpile of it himself and plans to rip people off. So it's just things like that. Like you have to be aware of, like just really, not let the excitement get to you, I guess, and kind of tap the brakes sometimes and really think about it. Right. There's that. And also just like, and I know this is said a lot, but really keep your keys and your passwords safe. Like I've heard, so people have heard stories of people losing their keys and losing their wallets or getting scammed like that. Like, really hold that stuff, close to your heart, because if you don't have your keys, you don't own your crypto, kind of thing, right? So basic advice like that. And yeah, just kind of really make sure you know where you're getting information from and keep your passwords close to your heart. Those are fundamentals to always remember.
Yeah, the self-custody piece is big. And I was talking about that in the last podcast with Dr. Lou a little bit about, of course, people are losing a lot of money by not keeping their, essentially the password to their crypto wallets safe. And then because it is self-custody, that means that there's, you only have control of these funds. You don't have a bank to fall back on if something goes wrong, if you send money to the wrong place, or if you lose your password, the money's gone forever. There's no way to fix that. Yeah. And something interesting is like, how do you get people to overcome that? Like it is a big responsibility. All of a sudden, for so long we've relied on other people to take care of our finances and our information for us. And how do you get people to realize that now that they have the power to do it themselves, to be comfortable with doing that?
I guess, how do we solve the question of human error kind of thing? Like how do we get around that? Because like you're absolutely right. Like we rely on a bank, that we're now, if you send the EMT the wrong place, you can probably call your bank and they'll be able to help you out in most situations. But you send your Ethereum to the wrong address. That's it. Like that's the show. And a lot of people just have that human error element where they don't copy and paste the address over properly, or they, make some other kind of mistake, like go on a wrong link or something and takes you somewhere else. But that is the case. And actually, I don't really know what the answer to that is. Like I've had people who are new to crypto ask me, how do I be safe and how can I avoid this? And I go, it ultimately will come down to you just to be careful and look out for yourself. And that's the best advice I can give someone, is you have to, do your own research, and you have to be on top of your own, actions, I guess. Maybe it's a poor way of wording it, but
yeah. Fair enough. I mean, that's just, I think, scary for some people, especially in like an older generation. You gotta, it's a big enough hurdle to even learn about this stuff. What is blockchain? What is cryptocurrency? And then once you figure that out, and what's the big point? It empowers you to have personal control of your own money and data.
Yeah.
And then, I can picture trying to tell my grandma that, and she's just gonna be like, what?
But the bank looks after my personal, why would I need that? Yeah. And it is hard to sell to someone who's never heard of the concept. Like sorry that I derailed, but like NFTs, like trying to explain, I have a 70-year-old coworker who works in the armoury basically, and then trying to explain crypto is one thing, and he understands the basis behind like Bitcoin. I'm like, store of value, I get that, right? But NFT, where I'm like, this picture of a monkey is actually worth about like $200,000, and he just looks at me like I'm absolutely like out to lunch, right?
Right.
But a recent example you gave, and that helped explain to him finally, was like with video games, and with NFTs, it's all about digital ownership, and what I understand, right? And that's a weird concept to wrap your head around. Because when you think digital, you're thinking of like data on a USB drive you just throw over your shoulder or something, or whatever, something in cyberspace. But then like take a video game, like say, I don't know, like Counter-Strike, where you're buying weapon skins that cost $20, $30, $300 for some of the rare ones. And then you get hacked, or say if you get banned for whatever reason, they get mad at the game and you say a bad word and they ban you. And all of a sudden you've lost your account and you've lost the investment you made into that with the microtransactions. With NFTs, in theory, you still own those things you've bought, and you can then give them to someone else and make up a loss. You can make a new account and transfer them over. It's like ownership of digital assets. And when I explained it to him, the light bulb went off in his head. And so that was just something I just wanted to throw in there about NFTs and people learning about these new things, I guess. So
That's good to hear that it at least got someone to get it.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast is take those concepts, NFTs, what have you, and make it to have some like analogies or some easily digestible way for people to get that light bulb, get that click, right? And understand, oh, of course I get it. So I'm hoping that at least by listening to us blabber on here for an hour, people at least get one little like light bulb moment like that.
Yeah.
Maybe like, oh, I didn't look at it that way before. I understand now. So
yeah.
So that is a goal. But let's get back to you because this is your show.
I'm the guest of honor, I suppose.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about just what you do on a daily basis? You know?
Yeah, so I get up really early before most people. I imagine my alarm goes off at 3 a.m, and I'm getting the Burnaby for my shift at 4:30, and then basically it's just like getting an armory ready for duty, where you're getting all the guns ready, you're getting the car keys prepared. Now with COVID, of course, I'm sanitizing things and wiping off equipment and cleaning it, right? And then around 5 a.m, the members start showing up for their day shift.
So who are the members?
Members are like RCMP members. Sorry, that's like internal talk for like police officer.
RCMP is the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, just in case anyone's like listening outside of Canada.
We probably should have specified. We're just like shouting off acronyms and assuming everyone knows. But so typically the day shift begins showing up around 5 a.m. Night shift begins getting off around 5. And so I'm taking their stuff and helping them go out on the road and be equipped for their day. And then when the shift changes over, I'm running spreadsheets and ordering equipment, doing maintenance on things. A lot of it goes back to like my previous background in like firearms, working for a gun store where I worked in a warehouse doing like a lot of things in logistics, like with shipping and receiving, ordering equipment from, the US, even from Europe in some cases. So at least for me right now, like I'm mostly ordering things within Canada because all of our, contracts are within Canada. Like you want to keep it Canadian, I suppose. But that's kind of my day to day, just like keeping track of a lot of spreadsheets, tracking thousands of serial numbers, that kind of thing, right? So data entry and working with guns all day, man. I love it. Can't complain. I actually get fan mail from kids from Burnaby who write in and go, "Oh, I heard about this job and we're big fans." Like there's this kid it's actually a weird thing. Like I had a thing from the mailroom, like, "Oh, what is this?" And then it's like a kid with crayon drawings on it, little cartoon drawing of like an armory, and you have the coolest job in the world. So like I really love what I do. It's very fulfilling work, and like you might not be on there in the road doing what the police officers do, but you're helping them along the way.
You're helping them.
You're serving those who serve, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Good,
I think if it weren't for you, they wouldn't have any weapons. You're running around with no equipment. It would be good. No one keeping the cars maintained. The city would be in flames. So.
Yeah, go to chaos pretty quickly, wouldn't it? Yeah. But just working with like a lot of inventory management and whatnot, and like you hear. With to bring this back, like the cryptocurrency and blockchain, like in the space you hear a lot of use for like the financial markets, like with smart contracts and whatnot, and you also hear use cases like for massive inventory management. Like I have heard a few cases like that. So like do you know a lot about how these use cases work, like for huge companies that have to track millions of different individual SKUs? Like how could blockchain be applied to that if that's the case? Like, are you familiar with that kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. And we touched on that in an earlier episode. We had Calvin on here, Calvin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's basically it's more so when you have a bunch of different companies in a supply chain. So when you have a different company that's in charge of the shipping and the manufacturing, and you have maybe different logistics companies for the overseas travel and the ground travel, and you're going to have dozens potentially of companies involved in a single supply chain if we're talking for some more advanced product, or something needs to travel a long way. Think like a global company that is distributing things all over the world, and then there's going to be different organizations they're interacting with at each different continent and country they end up in. So we're talking dozens of companies, all with their own records of what happened in the course of events in the supply chain. Like this piece of this good arrived in this shipping yard at this time, was received by this person, and only that one company has record of that. And that can be a problem when you are wondering like where is my shipment, and you have no idea. All you can do is you can ask this other company, and if they don't know, then it's lost somewhere in the middle. You don't know what happened. What blockchain allows in this supply chain is like a single source of truth, right? So basically we have this ledger that exists in a decentralized manner. So none of these single companies in supply chain have control or full like control of that ledger. It's kind of a shared product that everyone is using. And then because it is like a trustworthy ledger, that's what the blockchain technology allows us to, assuming it's implemented correctly, like 100% trust this. And now any company can look at this ledger, there's like a log of activities in the supply chain, and see like where a given product is at any point in the supply chain. Because every time it arrives at a certain destination, say it arrives at port, it's going to get scanned in. Rather than to a particular company's central database, it gets scanned into this distributed blockchain that all the parties in the supply chain have access to.
They can see it all real time as it goes along, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So you can trace a single product way back in origin to a particular location. That can help in instances like contamination of like food products.
Mm-hmm.
You can trace it back to where that contamination occurred, and you can trace the specific products that are contaminated, and you can find the specific stores that those products went to, and that way you're not throwing out like an entire batch because you're guessing of which ones are contaminated, that you can know specifically by tracking the supply chain on the blockchain. Can also help with supply chain disputes. If there's an argument about whether something arrived on time or in the correct condition, things like that, like you can have checks along the way in the supply chain that are recorded in this blockchain that show the journey of a product, and it lets you trace like specific instances where damage or contamination might have happened. You can use this to automate payments along the supply chain because everything is recorded, and you can say, okay, if this product reaches this destination at this time in good condition, then automate, in 30 days, someone will get paid.
Oh, I see. So instead of like Nancy and like the shipping port company has to inspect the shipment and then like take the company credit card and like approve a payment, like the automated system will just go, oh, like this is already hit here. It's hit the checks, boom, the money will come out of the account kind of thing. It just cuts out a lot of middleman stuff and saves time.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I guess that's the biggest thing, right? Saving time. You can have a lot of automation in terms of payments, in terms of tracking where something is or where something came from, and that is one of the more, I'd say, like kind of mainstream applications of blockchain. I find a lot of the times it gets lost in like the crypto and the NFTs, but like this technology does so much more. And even something like supply chains that is such like every company has a supply chain of some manner, and there's like we're talking all of these problems in the world today because of supply chains breaking due to COVID, due to recession, what have you. And if we had like a more efficient technology like blockchain behind these supply chains, like maybe things wouldn't be as bad today.
Yeah. Do you think there's some cases where blockchain like wouldn't be useful for a company or a government or something, and blockchain implementation would actually overcomplicate something? Like is that a case that could apply to a lot of things? Or
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely instances where you don't need a blockchain, especially when blockchain like really started to become this big buzzword. I'd say like 2018 around there. It was kind of sold as just throw a blockchain on it and it just gets better. But that's not the case. Like blockchain is very specific, right? So it's very good at eliminating third parties and creating an environment where you can do business with people without having to trust them. It eliminates the need for trust because we're not trusting another company to keep accurate records. We're trusting this distributed blockchain that every company has access to. Again, it's this single source of truth that everyone can look at in real time and say, oh yes, this is the current state of things. And that state might be the state of the supply chain, or it might be the state of the blockchain, so the Bitcoin blockchain, and who owns how many Bitcoin, right? But the point is everyone can look at it and see and rely on it and trust that.
It's a public ledger.
Yeah, so it's very good in the instances where we want to eliminate this need for trust, because trusting people is either expensive or it comes with the risk of them not being trustworthy and lying to you, and that raises disputes. That becomes expensive. So to get back to your question, where would blockchain not fit in? Just for example, probably in your job, specifically what you do in your inventory system for the Burnaby RCMP detachment, you don't need a blockchain, right? You have a database. It's
we
based
have
on
a system.
spreadsheets. Everything works. If you were to try to like throw blockchain in there, it doesn't make sense because you're only sharing information amongst the people in that like department anyways, right? So you don't ever have to worry about that problem of wanting to like trust another entity or needing to have the single source of truth, because you do. It's just the one that you have on your own central database, and that's fine. But now if you for some reason wanted to share that information with outsiders, like, well, how can I make this make sense? Like
between different police forces kind of thing?
Yeah,
Or,
like maybe,
example?
yes, yeah. So say there's like, yeah, so we have the Burnaby RCMP and then you have the Vancouver police, which are two different entities, right? And say maybe those two entities wanted to like, they shared the same inventory of guns, right? So I don't know why that would be the case, but maybe it makes sense. Maybe it makes sense for there to be a shared inventory of guns amongst different police detachments that have different records that they keep, right? So say if you don't have a blockchain there, then there might be like a gun that you're sharing between your departments, and it doesn't get one company or one detachment, or say the RCMP is going to say that, okay, we don't have this gun. According to our records, our internal records, there's no gun on the database. Like it's checked out. Like, so these guys must have it. But then what if the Vancouver police were like, oh, according to our internal database, also this gun is not there. Okay, so where is it? And so the two databases are clearly like different. Like you don't have that single source of truth. Now, if that was recorded on the blockchain, you could log it whenever the gun was taken out in whichever, the RCMP or the Vancouver police, and then both parties would have access to that blockchain, and then you have this one single source of truth that says, oh yeah, okay, at this time on this date by this person it was taken out, so now we know that's where it is. And then there's no arguing about it because
both sides can see in real time kind of thing,
because we're accepting that the blockchain is this source of truth that we're just relying on. Because I mean, you're trusting that the code that underlies this stuff that creates this verifiable system of like transactions is more reliable than humans.
Should machines govern us, man? This is completely gonna break off, but like honestly, this is kind of where this is going. I feel like we can't trust ourselves. There's corruption, there's issues worldwide. Like, you know, we've gone through the whole shipping thing. And trusting people, like your point about trusting people can be expensive or, you know, worse, right? Is this where we're going to be going one day, like decades from now, where it's just going to be, you know, AI is running the government, where it's perfectly fair and you've calculated that it makes the most people happy? And I don't know, like, should we just let things automate our lives? And, you know, sorry, just to completely branch off.
No, for sure. Let's talk about that. That's interesting. Should we let the machines govern us? I mean, I would say like probably not would be my first answer. Just if you look at, you know, popular media, you look at, you know, Terminator,
of course,
iRobot. You know what happens when we let the robots control us in the Matrix. It doesn't end well, but at the same time, I mean, we have these issues of, you know, of humans not being able to agree on things, you know, and having you know, the emotion can come into play and differing accounts. If there was probably some systems that would make sense to be arbitrated by machines. So smart contracts, for example, on a blockchain, it's taking like typical you know, business arrangements and automating them so that if one thing happens, then another thing happens. That's what these smart contracts are essentially creating, like logic statements. It's, you know, if something happens or if this input occurs, then this happens, or output, right? So in the supply chain example, it can be like if shipment arrives at this time, you know, on time in proper condition, then execute payment automatically, right? So we can do things like that, and then that's a way that let a machine take care of that, right? And then you don't have to worry about. You said Nancy was your example.
Nancy in the shipping department with a little checkboard, just making sure it all
exactly.
it's all there.
So you don't even have to pay Nancy at all, right? So that's great. But of course, there's other instances where, like, I don't know if machines should govern us. Like in terms of, I mean, you can go to the high level. Do you think machines should be like running the nations? Like what I mean, probably not.
Probably
but,
not.
You can argue that you need like some human nuance, that you're never gonna have things that are like absolute, because that's where the machines come in. And this does tie well with like what smart contracts can do and the limitations of them. It's things that you want to be absolute and irreversible, right? Because that's another thing about blockchains, is that once a transaction occurs, you can't undo it, which is good for some things and bad for others. So if you're trying to like put like laws for society onto the blockchain, like I remember taking it one step too far.
Yeah.
And another example is like the not so different future of like autonomous vehicles. And if it comes into like an unavoidable accident, and now the machines have to decide like who lives and who dies, right?
Yeah.
And like, do you want like machines to have
That decision.
yeah, like, I don't know. And then also even if it comes to like court, like if you have like a court case as someone, I don't know, someone stole something from somebody, but like the evidence is not clear, and you're gonna have this like machine, this algorithm based on all the data it's ever seen before, make a decision on like this crime that happened. Like, I don't know if you can trust a machine to do that, and then you have to like accept it, like that there's no discussing that or arguing. It's like, okay, the robot said you're guilty, so you're going to jail.
This might sound crazy, but I feel like I would feel more comfortable having a robot judge deciding my fate over like a human. So my fiance, she works in the court system in BC, and judges are just regular people like me or you who have biases, never admit it, but they're like us, right? And like, yes, they're very professional, they're very impartial most of the time, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
But then like there are times where someone's just rubbing the guy the wrong way, someone's like irritating them, or the person's belligerent and insulting the judge, and the judge is fine, or here's some extra jail time to make you happy. Are you happy now? Or like that kind of thing happens, right? Whereas a robot would just keep it cool and go, no, whatever. So, and then if a robot could have access to this massive database of every court case that's ever been done and how it's ever been resolved, not even just I guess you don't have to apply in Canada, because Canada has a different legal system than the US or everywhere else, but there would be no margin for error there, where it would just give you a complete fair decision. And couldn't you argue that is the fairest possible thing, like having an impartial machine, like an AI with no human bias, no element, no sympathy, just deciding your fate based on the laws and what pre-exists with case law?
I mean, that's like a
scary thought,
philosophical question.
Dystopian, very dystopian. But I would argue that's actually the fairest way to go. Because you remove that whole human bias equation thrown in there completely. Although, to give another example, I would prefer to have a human surgeon than a machine surgeon operating on me. But I'm okay.
I don't know. You're almost like contradicting yourself. You wouldn't trust the perfect robot with access to like millions of hours of like training of actually doing the surgery, precise
laser precision and everything,
as opposed to like the surgeon might have had a drink that day or something.
And I know, I agree, but then what if like the surgeon's doing its thing and all of a sudden a Windows 10 update shows up and it's like, nope, and like it's cutting me open, this seizes up and it's cutting me too much or something. Like, I don't know. It's just, I would gamble on the guy's hungover or he's mad his wife is divorcing him or something. Then just to have the human element in there.
Yeah. I think the takeaway is there is room for machines to automate many aspects of our lives.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's also a need for a human element, I would say, that will probably never go away. We are humans after all.
It's what we are.
So let's get back to blockchain, as fascinating as that conversation is. I think it would be really cool to hear some of your perspectives, because you work in government, on blockchain adoption in governments, and maybe specifically from your experience in the RCMP or anything kind of broader than that. Just where were things back when you started, and kind of where are things now? Okay.
Well, I know everyone's probably excited, but as far as I know, there's no official blockchain adoption for my employer, the RCMP. There's no blockchain adoption with like the city of Burnaby that I know of, and my fiance hasn't told me any adoption plans for the court systems either. So in terms of like adopting technology and utilizing it, there's no plans for that. But I guess because they aren't like a financial market, maybe they just have less use for it at this current point in time. But compared to how things were, like say 3 years ago, like I have a unique perspective because I suppose I work within an RCMP attachment. I have a lot of friends who are frontline police officers who work with things like, fraud and financial crime. And, we just have coffee room talk and they tell me things. And of course, when I first started there, I let it slip that I was into Bitcoin. And of course, like we talked about earlier, some people were like, oh, laughing at you. Oh, you're a Bitcoin fool. Oh, you idiot. You lost your money. You're never getting it back, right? But then there's some people who remember that and go, oh, okay, that's kind of neat. Like, I'll remember that because even back then, there were some cases trickling in of like people like, grandma having her Bitcoin stolen or grandma being told to buy Bitcoin with Target gift cards by some guy on the phone. And that gets brought up, right? But even then, it was like a fringe thing that wasn't really common, right? But now, from what I understand, it is becoming more common. Like it is a rising trend. Like there's more and more people as the adoption picks up, and it has ramped up, of course, as you know, last year, 2 years, right? Inevitably, more people are gonna get scammed and fall victim to these kinds of things, and these things will be, flow into my, I guess work environment, right? When these kind of files are coming in. So it's funny. Like now you have. Some police officers are advising mine are asking me, hey, like, what is this? Like, I have a guy who claims this was all stolen from him. Like, is there any way we can get it back? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, that's your job, man. That's you guys. I asked you the guns, right? Yeah. So I guess take that as you will kind of thing with where it's at. But like I said earlier, I think it's still the responsibility just lies in the person who's investing into this and buying into this space, because no one's really going to hold your hand. It isn't like you're a TD and you send the wrong EMT somewhere. If you lose your money, you're kind of out of luck, right? And of course, there are like divisions like for cybercrime and like for huge cases that involve tens of millions of dollars. But for Jimmy, who lost his Bitcoin when he was trying to send it to his wallet, no, like, sorry, right? And that's the current state of things. But that's just kind of how it has to be when you have something cutting edge like this. That's moving so quickly. And of course, government is, and in Canada, stereotypically, it flows like molasses, right? They're very slow to adapt, right? As it should be, right? Maybe in some cases it should be slow to adapt. And so inevitably now we have this crazy cutting edge tech, and our policies are, dinosaur in comparison to it, right? And it even gets to the point where you're asking, like in our criminal system, are like some of these charges that exist for current financial crimes, like do these even apply to new things that are emerging in this crypto space, like with NFTs and pictures of ape that cost thousands of dollars? Like is someone committing fraud by selling an NFT of an ape, but then it's actually only worth $1 when the hype ends, right? But that's that questions like that start to arise. And so I think this is something that a lot of governments are going to be struggling with, and just police in general, or just businesses like banks are probably reeling over this whole thing. Oh, like how do we counter our customers from investing in this when we want them to buy our mutual fund, but our mutual fund gives me like 0.0.
You put Bitcoin in the mutual fund.
Oh, dude, like could you imagine they had like a super high risk, like whatever, like Bitcoin mutual fund or something? But yeah, like that is another question. Like, are they going to begin offering these things? Like in Canada, instead of having to go through an exchange like, say, CoinSquare in Toronto or something, are you going to be able to go through TD and purchase Bitcoin with TD from your bank account directly?
I mean, they have like Bitcoin ETFs that exist, but that is a little one step removed from actually buying actual Bitcoin on TD's website that you can then send to your own crypto wallet. We're nowhere near that. That
also contradicts itself, having a bank hold your Bitcoin for you. That really, I feel like Satoshi would be like reeling in his grave and like, rise from the dead if he's dead.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's interesting that, at least from your perspective, that the government is like still very far behind on this, which is kind of, I'd say it's a net negative. Like some people might be excited that, I can kind of get away with more, or maybe I can have like some tax evasion. Maybe I can, commit some financial fraud because, there has been a lot of instances in crypto, in recent years of financial fraud just because of how unregulated it is that people can get away with a lot of stuff. And so at the end of the day, I think it's a negative really, because it's just people are going to be not confident using it, right? Because they think, if I do the wrong thing, I'm gonna get hit with this like tax bill or even be like running afoul of the law, and I don't know. And there's no one providing like clear guidance about it, right? And then also there's the issue of if something goes wrong, if they get scammed or hacked, like there is no recourse. Like you're saying, like, so like Jimmy, like, or sorry, rather his brother Timmy, he invested in some new NFT ape picture project, and he spent like $3,000 on an ape picture, and then the creator of that project took all the money and shut down the website and just ran away. So Timmy's out $3,000, which is like for some people a lot of money. But so what happens if Timmy goes to the RCMP and is like, I got robbed for $3,000 on this monkey picture?
Well, it's funny you asked that. If they came 3 years ago, they probably would have arrested him or for being mentally ill or something in public. But nowadays, no. I had a friend explain this concept to me. She said that it's what's called a concluded file, where it's basically when the file opens, when someone walks in, is like, I lost my Bitcoin. When the file is opened, it's immediately concluded because there's not much we can do. I mean, if it is just something cut and dry for like Bitcoin fraud, or you lost your Bitcoin or whatever, that kind of case is cut and dry, where it's like, sorry, like, so we'll make a file for it and we'll make a record of it, but we can't really help you, right? They don't have the resources, they can't refer them. Obviously, if it was something that came up like as part of a larger investigation, I'm sure it would be taken care of course. But But for poor Timmy, no, he's out of luck, right?
But yeah, like you were saying, for like, for example, this the Fed in the U.S. like a while back, they recovered like billions of dollars in stolen Bitcoin from a hack that happened years ago.
Yeah,
like something like that. Obviously, the government is more involved in actively trying to recover those funds. But for Timmy and his $3,000, no chance.
For the small fish in the pond, there's just no resources available, right?
But I don't want the people listening to get the wrong idea that because of that they should be scared and stay away forever, and that all hope is lost. So really, it's kind of funny that blockchain is often seen as this like haven for criminals, and this lawless wasteland where anything goes. Because the RCMP, the cops, they don't have the resources or the technology to keep track of this stuff. But I would say that's like yet, they don't have the resources and the technology yet, because with blockchain, especially these public blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they are open for everyone to view. They
always will be, right?
Yeah, and so it's like every transaction that ever happens is available for the public to see forever. Mm-hmm. So even if today you're committing like financial fraud, using blockchain technology, and you're like, okay, I'm getting away with it because the police don't have the resources or the technology to stop me or to catch me. Well, your crime is on the blockchain like forever. Yeah. So it's
recorded in that public ledger in the town square. Everyone's going to see it, right?
So assuming that like the technology continues to accelerate at the rate that it does, and that the governments are, I'm assuming they are actively trying to get up to speed, because they must understand how far behind they are and how bad that is. So eventually, probably, we get to this point where the RCMP does have the technology to, if Timmy comes and says, I lost $3,000 in this this rug pull or this blatant robbery on chain, they'll be able to like take his wallet address, and they'll be probably able to just plug it into some like program that can then track the flow of funds through the blockchain, and get some more information on where this attack originated. And then once we have more systems in place that are specifically designed to track that kind of stuff, I don't think it's going to be nearly as easy today as it is to get away with. So,
and I think that's something that's beautiful about it, how this is still pretty early on in its adoption, right? And like you said, this is all publicly available information in the ledger, right? So even crimes that I've committed even a couple of years ago, I do believe that in the future, not just Canada, like the US, like some of these huge frauds that happen in the US, I think they will eventually backlog that and maybe start solving old cases like this, right? And as time goes on, people are just going to get more and more training. The resources will finally become available, right? Like back to taxes, like tax evasion. I know that right now it's pretty wild of taxes for CRA in Canada, and CRA has a very unique stance on taxes of crypto, because they're probably reeling and they're freaking out, going, like, we have to track as much as possible. People are making crazy amounts of money. Like, how do we even do it? And that policy probably will change as time goes on. They're probably going to refine it a bit and make it a bit more, I guess, user-friendly is probably the wrong term, but I was trying to explain to my dad how the CRA wants to do cryptocurrency, and he was just scratching his head going, that they want to track, tax every single transaction you've made. I'm like, yep, every single crypto to crypto transaction is a taxable event at that Canadian dollar's value at that time, right? And then he's like, how many trades do you mean? I said, Dad, I was tapping on my phone in the bathroom for 2 years straight. Not a good idea, right? So, so, and I think like, I think a recurring theme we're having here is that we're trying to avoid scaring new people where it's like, oh, your taxes are bad, you're going to lose your passwords. But like, it's really not as scary as this all comes out in. And like, you will pick up on this stuff quickly. And in some cases, it can really change your life and it can empower people. Just take what's happening in Europe right now. Like what if you had to pack up your life and leave and like flee the country? Like you can't, say you stuffed cash into your purse, you had it in your mattress. Well, maybe your country's currency is now worthless. Or if the currency has retained value, you're a refugee and someone could just grab your purse and now you have nothing. Whereas like with your crypto, you can just have your key, memorized or written down on a napkin in your back pocket. And then you get somewhere safe, you get to a computer or somewhere you trust, and then you have your funds again. No government can take that from you. No robber in a checkpoint can take that from you, right? If you survive, of course, right? But that's just an example I can give. Like this stuff is so insane, and it boggles me how some people initially they don't see the point of it, and I go like, you can bypass like your government's, like say if you're in China and extending funds overseas or sending them out of the country, right? Like there's restrictions on that. And for the first time in our history, we can bypass that. And you really can empower the individual, I guess with their banking, right? Like you can bring banking services and financial services to people in countries that don't have it before. And I don't really know any other time in history something like this has happened. Like, I don't know, maybe something like the Industrial Revolution is kickstarting civilization, but I strongly feel like this is the next big jump in tech that we've seen. I know it's very cliche to say it, and every crypto guy is like, oh, this is the next big thing, but really, like, this is, and we're seeing it unfold in our lifetime, and this is just truly wild to see, and being a part of this journey has been awesome. Like,
yeah, dude, amen. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, you started by saying it's beautiful, and it really is, and yeah, the situation in Europe, like, is a great example of of finally like the world, I think, seeing like the potential for this stuff. Ukraine's official Twitter account posted a crypto address for donations, and they received millions and millions of dollars over the internet, in this borderless, permissionless fashion, that anyone in the world for very, very low fees could donate money to the government of Ukraine. And you're not dealing with the money traveling through the very slow traditional banking system, having to change between different currencies and have to deal with like, how do you actually get the money to this person? It's like, oh, I'm just gonna send it to this wallet address and it's there in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And millions of dollars. It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And also the refugees, like if your currency is devaluing or you don't have access to the bank anymore because you're literally like under attack, you have to flee the country. You can't give them your cash is in the bank. You can't get to the bank. You can't get your funds out. Like, well, okay, I've got my crypto. Yeah, and it can be in your head, right? Yeah, if you have the password memorized, like your crypto is technically it's not anywhere physical. It's in your head as long as you're the one who knows the password. And
yeah.
And also people in even before this humanitarian crisis, all the other stuff going around in the world. The 2 billion people in the world who don't have access to bank accounts.
The unbanked. I love that concept.
Yeah, right. The people who have to deal with like corrupt government regimes, and they don't know if they're going to be able to go to the bank to get their money tomorrow.
Yeah.
All those people who are like they're suffering. They don't have access to these things that we here in this part of the world take for granted, right? This stuff is a way for them to be saved in a way. Like the institutions and the governments and the banks in their countries, they're not helping them. They're not out for their best interests. And you could argue that maybe even here they're not out for our best interests, but at least they are care enough about us that I can open a bank account. And I can, for the most part, I trust that my money's going to be there tomorrow, right? But in a lot of places in the world, that's not the case. And with crypto, it doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care where you come from. If you have an internet connection, you can participate in global finance, right? And that's so amazing.
You don't have to submit a minimum deposit when opening up a checking account or something, like it's great, right? And it truly lets anyone, as long as internet connection, start to have financial independence in the way. And that's a beautiful thing that hasn't really existed until just quite recently.
Yeah. It's and then you take it one step further, like even beyond money, like you have NFTs, which let you have a similar concept of this self-custody, but of other assets, right? Like we're gonna see NFT real estate pretty soon, where your house is going to be represented as a token on the blockchain, and then in the eyes of the law, the owner of that NFT is the owner of the real estate. Actually, this is a really interesting story I can bring into this. So
I love this.
I was just talking to my roommate.
Okay.
His family's from India, and his family owns or owned real estate in India, but they all live here in Canada.
Okay.
And they found out that someone, so they technically own this land, right? But someone in India just came and claimed their land and sold it to someone else. And there's no recourse for them because of government corruption,
Record keeping,
so this person, apparently they had some like affiliation with the government or something. I don't know like all the details, but basically there's no way for them to get the land back. Like they were basically when they attempted to, they were threatened, right? So that's how deep kind of the corruption runs, and that's the problem with the way real estate currently is. You're trusting the government to keep this like land registry of who owns what house, right? If you can't trust the government, and now all of a sudden some random person can just come and claim your land and sell it to someone else, and then like you're just screwed. There's nothing you can do.
That's a very good point. Right? And I think that's a concept like a lot of people maybe like around us living in the first world, and maybe why they find the concept of crypto adoption kind of like not needed, because we are blessed to have a government that for the most part is kind of looking out for us, right? So to us, like, oh, like, why do I care if I can bank with Bitcoin? I trust TD with my money, right? But then if you're in Venezuela, like, oh my God, like you need something to help you, right? Like if you're in a country that's corrupt and your money is worthless, right? This is a huge opportunity. And I guess maybe for some people who live in the first world, it's not going to be as interesting or won't seem as important, and maybe the value won't be immediately apparent because we're growing up here.
We're lacking the perspective.
We're lacking the perspective.
Yeah. And so it's just a way, for people to bring the power back to the people, right? Really, like just to finish that story, right? My friend's family is screwed. They went and sold all their other real estate in India because they couldn't trust the government to safeguard that asset for them. But so if in the future NFTs are kind of the standard for real estate, that can't happen. Surely someone could go there and claim the land and say, oh, this is my land now. But anyone who understands the way that the system works, which as we go forward in time, it's going to become more and more adopted, that assets are represented via tokens on the blockchain, right? So if I in my wallet have this NFT that is attached to this house, they're linked in a way. Now no one is going to go and be the buyer in that deal. If some like corrupt guy comes and steals this land and tries to sell it, I'm going to be okay, will you send me the NFT now?
Yeah,
and go like, oh, I don't have the NFT. Oh, okay, well, this isn't your land. Why would I buy it off you, right?
Yeah.
And this can be translated to even things like vehicles. You can have it so there's some instances where people try to sell like stolen vehicles to someone, and then I actually learned about this in law class.
That'd be cool.
Yes, basically, right. If someone steals your vehicle and then they sell that to someone else, the person who originally owned that vehicle can't sue the person who bought the stolen vehicle if that person didn't know that it was stolen. Because officially, and in the eyes of the law, at least in Canada, from what I learned, that person now officially owns the car. The person who bought it off the person who stole it. And there's no legal recourse if they didn't know that it was stolen.
Yeah, because you're basically a victim of your own, especially argue like, hey, like I need this car, like I bought this legally with cash,
it's not fair to the person who bought it then at that point to say, okay, I have to give that car back to that person, but I paid the scammer, right? Okay, so now a solution to that, NFTs vehicles. And again, I'm not going to buy a car off of somebody unless they have the NFT that is linked to that car. And the NFT is verifiable because I can trace the NFT in the blockchain to all its previous owners, even to back to the plant that it came out of, right? So you're gonna have, the vehicle assembly plant. When the car is created, you're gonna mint an NFT attached to that car. And now every time that car transfers ownership, the NFT transfers ownership along with it.
Oh, I see what you mean.
And so that's just one instance of helping people to avoid fraud even in the real world. Right?
Yeah, you go to the Ford dealership, and along with your car now, it also comes with the NFT. It's tied to that car's serial number or whatever. It's unique to it. And then when you sell the car, I guess you sign the NFT too.
Mm-hmm. And it helps with the issue of like lemons when you like used cars, right? Like 'cause that's a big problem. The buyer in the used car market's at a disadvantage because often the seller will charge more than it's really worth or lie about certain things that happen to it. So this automobile NFT can actually record all of the maintenance history in the vehicle. So every time you take your car to the shop to get your brakes done or whatever it might be, they're going to then enter a record in the blockchain of that attached to that NFT. And every future owner can look at that and see every time the car has been to the shop for anything.
Well, I find that really fascinating how this car NFT will track all the previous maintenance and whatnot. And you even expand on that and go back to your previous point about tracking recalls of bad produce. With current automotive recalls that they have to recall every single car, if they could save the money and only have to recall, say, a few thousand cars that had a bad part installed versus the whole batch, that's going to be a big incentive for auto manufacturers to get into this space and adopt this technology.
Yeah, definitely. There's actually an automobile what are they called? It's this group of companies, this consortium of automobile companies called Mobi, that they're actually looking to find the best way that they can implement blockchain into their processes. And remember we were talking about what's like a good application before, what's a bad application of blockchain. So because the automobile supply chain has all these different auto manufacturers and shops where they do maintenance and part suppliers, and in this instance, if we want to have this like automobile NFT that any of these parties can use to track that movement of the ownership of the vehicle, that's a great place for blockchain because we have all these different parties with their own records that they keep. And then if they can all instead be using one single record, the blockchain, then it allows for all these use cases.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think it's almost time that we wrap up. But before that, I would love to ask you one more question. So what do you think the next 5 years look like for cryptocurrency and blockchain, and where do you see yourself within that?
Good question. I love this question. This gets brought up in almost every kind of crypto podcast, but everyone's going to probably have a similar answer where it's going to be something more in the lines of like, we're just going to see more and more adoption, more and more real use cases. It'll become more ingrained in our everyday lives. Right? Like I was saying earlier in the podcast, how Bitcoin's like a household name now. I'm not saying that, all the little, DeFi projects and CryptoKitties is known, but like the main things, Ethereum, Bitcoin, how an exchange works, wallets, people are starting to catch on to that. That's adoption. So I think in 5 more years, it will just keep expanding on that, where maybe it's more integrated, like we're talking about our bank, how we can perhaps, have more options for purchasing things through our bank, or maybe even the Canadian dollar becomes a token of some sort and we can start doing it that way. And then the second part of your question, I guess that's a good enough answer. It's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. It goes up from here, right? Is where's my plans of it? I actually, some people think I'm crazy, is that I actually do plan, I talked to my fiance about this, is we want to move almost all of our assets out of traditional stocks, savings accounts, mutual funds into cryptocurrency, in particular Bitcoin, because I am a long believer of the concept of this. I want to be in charge of my own money. Like, a few months ago, there was a huge protest in Canada with a trucker convoy. And I remember I was drunk watching it thinking it's hilarious. Oh, those idiots in those trucks is causing havoc. I love it. This is chaos, right? And I was drunk on my balcony. I almost like went on Fiverr and gave them like $20 or something to say, just to keep fighting your silly fight, whatever, right? And potentially that my banks could have been frozen from that because the government was freezing accounts who had contributed to this campaign. And then they would have locked up my credit cards, my bank. I couldn't have bought gas to go to work in theory, right? And so I was telling Sam, like, we have to be in control of our own money and be absolutely in control of it. And also, I hate to be doom and gloom again, this is a recalling thing, but we're in a very uncertain time right now with hyperinflation. who knows what the economy is going to look like in the next couple of years, right? We've printed so much typical fiat currency, you know, like federally issued currency kind of thing. I don't know what that looks like. That's why, so I'm telling my friends, I currently actually don't hold a lot of cryptocurrency. I'm living inside of my cryptocurrency right now. I recently entered the real estate market. I bought my first apartment with Bitcoin, essentially. Well, with my profits in Bitcoin, of course, right? So I'm very, very bullish long term for it. It's a huge concept, and it's just unlimited potential, like the unbanked, a concept we touched on before. And like, I'm sorry for rambling, but it's just there's so much potential here, and it's going to change. It has potential to influence and change everyone's lives for the better, whether if you're, you know, living in the first world or living in the third world, right? It's unlimited potential, and I'm super excited to be a part of this and like be witnessing this in my lifetime, I suppose.
I think that's a great place to leave it. Very inspiring.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks so much for being on the show, Ryan.
Happy
really
to be here, man.
it.
Happy to be here.
Okay, if we at all provided you any value today, we just ask that you like and subscribe and share with your friends, and tune in next time while we continue to deliver you interesting, simple takes on blockchain topics. Thanks.